Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Unhealthy Podcast. I'm your host, Uncle Marv. This is part 2 of my conversation with Len May, the co-founder and CEO of EndoDNA. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, well, go back and start there. We dug into DNA, epigenetics, the endocannabinoid system, and how all of that can be used to personalize your health. In this episode, we're going to make it a little more personal. We pick up right where we left off and get into Len's story, being diagnosed with ADD, using cannabis as his own medicine, dealing with family conflict, and even homelessness, and how all of that eventually led him into the genetics, precision medicine, and the platform he's built today. All right, let's jump back in with Len May. So this is going to be a side question because I want to tie in a little bit of the health aspect. Throughout this time, were you having any discussion with traditional medicine as we know it? I know that as you were being diagnosed with the ADD and the ADHD, that wasn't working and cannabis did for you, but did that kind of take you off the path of traditional medicine, or did you go back and forth with anything?
I never took traditional medicine except for that time.
Okay.
I don't even take Advil or Tylenol. So when I was a kid, I already said I immigrated here. So we immigrated with my parents and my mom's parents. So my grandfather had a stroke a couple of years that we were in America. And he proceeded to have multiple strokes, lots of health issues. A really large man. My grandmother was a really small woman, and then half his side was paralyzed, and he couldn't speak anymore. And I'd never forget, my mom and my grandmother would be sitting with like bags of prescription medications with doctors, and they kept saying, change this one to this one. They kept having these adverse effects from prescription medication. So I always had this kind of thought inside that I don't want to put that in my body. So from being a kid, I really avoided prescription medications. So when you're talking about traditional doctors and healthcare practitioners, yeah, I always spoke to doctors and practitioners, but I don't take pharmaceuticals. Just my choice. I mean, unless it's an absolute must, but I don't take pharmaceuticals. Not that I have anything against them personally. I just think there's other things that you can do in combination with that. Look, we are exceptionally astute at acute care in this country. When something is acute, we have the best surgeons in the world. If you have a fracture, you have to get the fixed. I would go nowhere else. This is the best country in the world for that. But when you talk about chronic conditions over time, we don't do a really good job of that. We treat the symptoms, not the condition.
Okay.
So to answer your question about traditional medicine, how the segue happened. So we're doing all these genetic testings for the endocannabinoid system, thousands of customers all over the world. And I get a call from a doctor that I knew that I know, and she specializes in female hormone health. That is her main thing. Urologist by training, but that's her practice is what she does. So she goes, Len, I'm seeing a lot of women who are in their late 20s and early 30s that are getting perimenopause symptoms. It's like, really? That's interesting. Maybe that has something to do with the hormones that are in our water and food. It's very early to start experiencing perimenopause. And then she said, I'm also seeing a lot of women that are, experiencing menopause in their 50s with really adverse effects, like hot flash severity, hot flash frequency, weight gain, all these different things. She goes, is there a way that we can test to see if we can get ahead of these conditions expressing themselves? So I usually say yes to everything and then figure it out later. So I said, yes, we can. And I went to my bioinformatics team and we build a female hormone health test that looks exactly at those predispositions to the conditions I mentioned. And then the doctor can go in and create a protocol that's specific to the woman to prevent the expression of that. So what does the protocol look like? Well, one of them is hormone optimization. So we're looking at hormone levels that are in serum and blood, and we're looking for those predispositions. So maybe they metabolize really rapidly. Maybe they're a rapid aromatizer. So you have to optimize your hormone levels. Other things are supplementation. What are the other supplements, nutrients, medical food products that we can put in our bodies to mitigate the expression of some of these conditions that I mentioned as well? And then the third is, what can we do lifestyle wise? So as we started developing that, we started moving into other tests. The next was male hormone health, because you may or may not know that men go through their own version of menopause. It's called andropause. So our testosterone level goes down, all these energy goes, all these different things happen to us. So we've neglected ourselves for a long time. I'm not saying that the focus is on menopause, but menopause is there as well. So we started looking at the male hormone health test, and then we kind of expanded from there.
Right. So just to wrap up the traditional medicine part and we can move on, if we now have all of this DNA testing and tracking and editing and stuff that we can do, are we not able to make better use of all of the pharmaceutical stuff and everything? I'm not talking about all the stuff that's being, advertised on TV and all of that stuff to fix ED and all that stuff, but it seems as though we should be in a much better place to, as you say, prevent a lot of these things, but also to figure out, you mentioned the chronic pain. We should be able to start fixing that stuff now, right?
Yeah. It depends where the pain is coming from. I have nothing against pharmaceuticals, like I said. So in our platform, for instance, when the doctor uses our platform, they swab their patients, they register, they send them to get blood. So we have baseline markers for everything. Then the platform, and you can also interrogate the genome. So you can ask it any questions. There's our AI platform is called BIOS. You can go in and ask, any question, it'll come back in fifth grade language. Now, the thing that it comes back to the doctor with is a suggested treatment plan. And the treatment plan is in three parts. The first part is pharmaceutical intervention. So these are the pharmaceutical interventions that are suggested for the doctor to use for that patient. The second one is your supplementation. The third one is lifestyle. So to answer your question, absolutely, you can actually use pharmaceuticals to prevent some of these conditions. The key now is you can personalize it, so you can know how to dose correctly with a pharmaceutical for the patient. So I'll give you an example on hormone optimization, because I just went through this weekend at a conference. I asked a lot of these. So there was a clinic that was doing pellets. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they inject a pellet with a hormone in the butt of a woman or man, and that pellet time releases hormones over several months. And you so you don't have to get a shot every week or month. I don't know how long it lasts for. So you do it every several months. So I asked, how often do you do this? The doctor said, well, we do it 3 months. Every 3 months, we inject, insert the pellet, and then we replace it 3 months later. I said, well, how do you know it's 3 months? I don't know. Well, that's the average. Well, based on we created a dosing calculator. So based on lifestyle factors, BMI, weight, genetics, blood serum, all this stuff, it showed different dates of insertion that is personalized to the individual. So somebody may be 5 months, somebody may be 2 months. So even dosing specifically for the individual, just on hormones, which are pharmaceutical, that's one of the keys that you can use the platform for.
All right. So you just talked about, personalizing some of this medicine stuff. I was going to ask you about that, but let me go back and ask this, and maybe this will help connect some of those dots and stuff. A lot of these things, as you've been going through and doing your research and partnering and stuff, a lot of discoveries, a lot of neat, exciting things. Is there something that excited you more than anything else as you have been along this journey?
Well, I'm always seeing people, and we have a ton of testimonies. I'm always seeing people that have had an experience and it was a negative experience with medication or some other kind of dosing, but using a platform and using the ability to personalize it changes everything for them. Like, you know, I'm not talking about cures, and we're not making any claims, but people have colitis, people have gut health issues, been able to reverse that. People have these hormone conditions, really adverse effects, been able to reverse that. We're in the middle of 4 clinical trials right now. We have 16 citations in PubMed. Our clinical trials is Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism. We can see that there are certain medications that are specific for the individual with that specific dose that are actually reversing some of these conditions in people. So to me, that's the most exciting thing. And the last part of that is that bookending the experience. And this is something that's unique because, when you're talking to doctors, how do you know that protocol that you're actually recommending for somebody, how do you know how well it works for that individual? Well, just one of the things that you can do is patient-reported outcomes. So you're coming back and saying, I'm feeling better, doc. Okay. But what about on your epigenetic level? What about on your blood work? What's happening in the moment to see how efficacious that protocol is? And the platform learns from that. And then the AI starts saying, you know what, Marv, there's 50 people that have similar genetics to you that have taken this protocol and showed that it was effective for them. So this is what I'm going to start you on. And that's what's really exciting to me. It's the feedback loop when we start getting that data back and the platform learns from that data and really personalizes it. So right now, we can personalize and create precision medicine. But at some point in the near future, when the data gets bigger, we can individualize it. And you have 3D printing, you have nanobots, you have all these different technologies that are coming out that really start individualizing that medicine specifically for me and you.
All right. So that will kind of close that gap for me because now I can ask this. You already mentioned that you're in the middle of more clinical trials. How much of that is coming from traditional medicine? Where do you have doctors or organizations coming you to say, hey, we see what you're doing. We love what you're doing. How can we, incorporate that into what we're doing?
Yeah. I mean, we work with doctors. Our customer is a doctor. Okay. Now, I want to the caveat is that almost all there are functional medical professionals. Okay. So their doctors are looking at treatments that are outside of the traditional sort of norm. Some of them are using exosomes and stem cells and peptides and, a GLP-1 like a semaglutide, et cetera, is a Ozempic is a peptide. And we're experimenting and looking at other peptides. Not all of them are FDA approved. Very few are. But, these doctors are still looking at those things, looking at what can we do. Like, I'll give you my own personal example. So I tore my meniscus in my knee on both sides. I'm a pretty active guy. And I have a friend who's an orthopedic surgeon. And I went to a bunch of different surgeons. And my friend's like, I can snip it for you. It's really easy. We can snip on one side. We can snip on the other side. And you'll be back and you'll wear a brace, and in a month you'll be back. I said, okay, well, if you snip on this side and you snip on that side, my meniscus that was once this big now becomes this big. So, smaller. It's like, yeah. So if I'm an active guy, I'm a hiker. So I'm lucky to live in Los Angeles. I can hike all year long. What's going to happen to that meniscus as it gets smaller and smaller as I get older and still active? So, well, maybe 10 years, maybe 15, you will have knee replacement surgery. So I said, okay, what alternatives exist for me to, instead of removing something, cutting it, what can I do to maybe add something? And he said, well, we have this ability to use exosomes. Exosomes are precursors to stem cells. So they provide a signaling mechanism that attracts new cell growth. And I had that done 8 months ago or so, and I don't need surgery. My meniscus is regrowing itself. and it's actually creating, new cell tissue in that place. So these are the things that we're looking at to see what can we do to improve healthcare instead of, constantly cutting things out.
Right. Now, the average person is not going to know to ask what you asked in terms of, cutting something out versus adding something. We're just going to listen to the doctor, and the doctor says we can do this. And then they, usually say, well, what's our alternative? Like you mentioned, well, you'll have replacement. And we've come to accept that that's the norm. So how do we start to make that shift as a society?
Don't accept it as a norm. Always accept that there is alternatives. So one of the things that we decided in our platform, for instance, the doctor is the ultimate decision maker. So when the doctor gets their information, they decide what to do with the treatment plan. So here's your suggestions, doctor. You get to accept these, save these. Now you have a treatment plan, and it has those parts to that I explained. But also, you have a patient portal. So in the patient portal, it also has the treatment plan and has patient report outcomes. So now you and your doctor are partners in your healthcare journey. Look, your doctor can have hundreds of patients. You are your own patient. You're your best patient. A doctor never said they're going to cure anybody of anything. They're there to do no harm and try to do the best that they possibly can to be able to address your condition and symptoms. But you have to help the doctor help you. So you have to be diligent in your pursuit of health and wellness. And, with AI, it's helpful. You can ask a question. It used to be Dr. Google. Now it's Dr. ChatGPT or whatever it is. But it hallucinates. It makes mistakes. And if it's your health, I get it if I made a mistake on my paper or something like that, if I'm writing something, but if it's your health, you can't afford to make mistakes. So you have to look at an LLM that's grounded on healthcare, a large language model like ours or anything else that has healthcare and is trained for what the specialty of that practitioner does. So now that it's trained on that, and it's always evolving and training, you have to ask your doctor questions. And if you don't like the answer, go get a second opinion. But you have to be also diligent to try to find what else alternatives exist for you and to personalize the treatment. Look, my daughter was going back to school a few years ago, and she had to get this physical, signed off on for school. And we went to see her doctor, and it was a 15-minute visit. And, he listened to her breathing and he looked at her throat, and I'm like, are you going to take the mallet and hit her knee too? Are we in the 1950s still? It's ridiculous. And I understand why, because insurance reimbursed in a 15-minute visit more, like the ratio of reimbursement, you get a lot more for your 15-minute visit than our visit. But is it really like healthcare? Or are we just kind of checking off boxes and going through the motions? And these are the things we have to challenge our doctors for as well. Like I said, they have hundreds of patients. We are our own most important patient.
All right. So you've mentioned the platform a couple of times, and I just want to ask, before we talk about, where people can go for more information and stuff, is your platform that you're talking about something where we can go as regular people, get in there, look at stuff, start to figure some stuff out?
Yeah. The only test that we sell direct to consumer is the endocannabinoid system test.
Okay.
And the reason why is because the doctor cannot prescribe that cannabis yet. Hopefully, soon. There is one FDA-approved product called Epidiolex, and that is for a certain form of epilepsy called Dravet syndrome or childhood epilepsy. But for the most part, everything else is not. It's still. It's going to be rescheduled to Schedule 3, but it's still Schedule 1. So you can get an endocannabinoid system test through the platform, but all the other tests are sold to practitioners, to doctors. So you would have to ask your doctor to go on the platform or the test, and then work. There's, like I said, there's a patient view and a doctor view as well.
Okay. We'll get to that site in just a minute, but I do want to go back the FDA approval. I know that that's something where as soon as you say FDA, there's people that are going to be like, oh, love the FDA. I wish, everybody would just, go through the process, get FDA approved. And then there are a lot of people that are like, you know what? the FDA is holding us back, man. There's so many good things out there. If the FDA would just speed up the process and, make it to where we can do these things. Describe for us what that means for, our health in terms of getting FDA approved and, is that the right thing to do?
Well,
I probably shouldn't have asked that last part, should I?
I don't know. Well, I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not, but I'll explain the process and I'll explain the difference. So our test is not FDA approved. It is RUO, research use only. Okay. And the reason we did this for a reason, because when you get an FDA approved genetic test, usually it's a diagnostic test. We're not looking to be a diagnostic test. And what happens when you get a diagnostic test, there's DNA tests that have been used for 50 years for BRCA1, BRCA2 breast cancer. So if somebody has predispositions to that, there is an ICD-10 code that's associated with that. That means that insurance can reimburse that test. We're not looking for that. We're cash only, functional medical professionals that are not taking insurance. Okay. So that's one of the reasons why we did that. Now, we met with the FDA. We told them what we're doing. They told us not to make any claims and have disclaimers and all that other stuff. Great, we do all that stuff, but we want to be transparent. Now, as far as drugs go and drug discovery, there are some challenges. And the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry is really focused on single molecules. Now, if you think about it, most drugs that we have from pharmaceuticals came from plants originally. And what they're doing is they're synthesizing plants, creating metabolites of that plant or an isomer of that plant, and now they have a synthetic version. Now it goes through the phases of FDA, costs maybe millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in years. So there's 3, and then phase 4 is acceptance, but the first one is safety. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to test the drug for safety. Now, to make sure there's no adverse effects. Now, it doesn't have to mean there's no adverse effects. It means that the adverse effects there's a ratio. So it didn't kill that many people, or it didn't hurt that many people, and there's black box warnings that they can put on the medication. The second one is scale. So or efficacy. They want to see how efficacious it is. The third one is scale. Now they want to scale it out to different people. So as long as it passes all these phases, takes years and hundreds of millions of dollars, now you have an FDA-approved product. With the FDA-approved product, how efficacious it need to be? There's a certain percentage how efficacious it doesn't mean it's 100% effective, and it doesn't mean that dose that they're suggesting for you is a dose for you. It means that this is a safe dose, that it didn't cause a lot of effects within this range. But it doesn't mean it's effective for you personally. So, I'll question some of that information that comes from, these FDA-approved drugs per se. And also, I think the bigger challenge is the drug-to-drug contraindications. If I have a few more minutes, I'd like to tell the story that recently happened to a friend of mine. I have a friend who's a very successful business person and made a lot of money and did really well. And then for some reason, he invested in this venture. It didn't go well. And he became depressed. He went to a psychopharmacologist and got an antidepressant. Now, I live in LA, as I mentioned, and he doesn't live in LA, but he was in LA, or I think he has a place in LA as well, but he lives somewhere else. So he was driving around the canyons with his wife and one of his kids. And he told me he had an overwhelming desire to drive off the cliff. He goes, it was so real that he was so scared he pulled over and got out of the car, and his wife came up and said, "Are you okay?" He said, "No, I'm not okay." Said, "What's wrong?" He goes, "I just should not be driving." Luckily, he realized that. His wife ended up driving. So we did his DNA test. Number one, the medication that he was put on was the wrong medication for him. It was flagged red, and had a lot of contraindications with something else that he was taking. And the side effect of that medication, one of them is suicidal thoughts. So he was experiencing the side effects. Number two, he was predisposed to depression. For sure, he had that genes for that. But he also had a gene for treatment-resistant depression, which means that medication wouldn't have worked for him most likely in the first place, but he got the side effect, which was suicidal thoughts from that medication. So I was given a talk in front of a bunch of big pharma and also psychopharmacologists. And I asked everybody in the room, I said, how many of you do a pharmacogenomics, a PGX test, before you prescribe that type of medication? How many hands do you think went up?
0 to 1?
0, not 1. So that tells you something about us having to be proactive and ask for things that maybe our doctors may not be aware of right now.
As you were telling that story, in the back of my head, all I keep thinking about is all those commercials we hear on the TV, and at the end they try to slide in, all those adverse effects may cause blah 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 blah, and it's. I don't want to make light of it, but a lot of times we sit there and say, okay, the effects are worse than the actual thing the drug is for. I think I'm good.
It's funny because I don't really watch regular TV, but I watch sports. And when you watch sports, they have the commercials.
Yep.
There was a drug for eczema, I think it was. I'm not mentioning any names, but it's that. Like, all right, I have eczema, but a drug can kill me.
Yeah.
So I'd rather walk around with the eczema or I'd take the medication.
Yeah, it could cause this, which could end up in death. And then there's one, and I'm going to say it just because I need people to understand why it stuck with me. Anal leakage. I don't need that. That's just, I think I'll take my chances.
Exactly.
So I thank you for the story and thank you for explaining all of this. I do want to try to get back to, for a regular person. Now, first of all, if you've made it this far, thank you, bless you. But also now the payoff, I think, is what in terms of health-wise, let's start with what are some of the common mistakes people make when they're trying to get healthy? And then the second part of that would be, what are some things we can do to take these steps in this new direction of DNA?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that people do and make mistakes with is they follow other people. So, look, Uncle Marv did this, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do intermittent fasting. Well, intermittent fasting may work for Uncle Marv, but it may not work for me. So we all are individuals, and we have to look at what we need to do as individuals. I think the number one thing that we can all be aware of, that we can take real action in and have accountability, is what we put in our bodies. Food. Food is medicine. So it sounds so hokey and cheesy, but it's so true. And I don't think we understand how our body utilizes food. Look, there's studies about aging as a disease. There's a Dr. Sinclair out of Harvard has a longevity lab, and they're reversing blindness right now with certain therapies because it's degeneration. So there's disease of, and there's a disease of aging. Now, there's a whole process and methodology for aging that we are seeing. And I'm going to get to answer your question, what we can do. But there is something called the Yamanaka method. So the Yamanaka method, Dr. Yamanaka received a Nobel Prize for health for this. And one of the things that happens to us as we age, we have a genetic sequence, so our genes, and think about it as like a binary code, ones and zeros everywhere. As we age, the cells, the communication between the cells kind of shift. So the ones and zeros shift a little bit. So it's not as they was when we were younger. They keep moving. And as they're moving, the cells begin to stop creating new cell growth. So if we can modify that, number one reason is food. The food that we put into our bodies, it actually prevents us from getting the right fuel in what's called the mitochondria, which is that batteries for the cell, and that mitochondria uses something called ATP to convert our food into energy to create more cell growth. So if we're using, if we're using food that's not real food, that's processed food, we're not getting that fuel. We can feel something. It feels like we're full, but we're not getting the fuel into the energy cell. So it causes us to age more rapidly. And the other things is we're not releasing stem cells that are stuck in our fat and all these other things. So the food that we are consuming is extremely, extremely important. Real food. I'm sure you heard and your audience has heard, shop on the outside of your supermarket.
Yep.
Don't buy the things that are in cans and processed. Like we think it's good for you. And they write, healthy alternative. It's not real food. It doesn't come from the ground. It doesn't come from, whatever you believe, source, Mother Nature. It's not real food. And the things I said before, it's like you have to move the body. The body needs to be lubricated. And the exercise that you do when you're younger is not the same the exercise that you do when you're older. But you need to have resistance training as part of your exercise. We have to be able to compensate and start building muscle and continue to build muscle as we age. So we have that stability in place as well. So being able to move our bodies and work out is extremely important. Look, I'm not a fan of the gym. And I took this class on flow state. I don't know if you're familiar with flow state.
No.
There's a guy named Stephen Kotler who taught this class on flow. And basically flow state, the analogy I like to use is when a basketball player is on fire, they're hot, they describe as the basket is like a swimming pool. I can hit the shot from anywhere. So the neurochemicals are getting secreted from our brain into our bloodstream or their optimal level for that individual. They're on. It's like everything is perfect. So that's our flow state. So we can prime ourselves for flow state if we know what it is that we do. Like for me, I realized during COVID that going out in the nature, hiking is my thing. So when I have a question that I need to answer, I go out and I tune my antenna. That's once again, I'm LA, so it's woo. But I'm from Philly, so I'm not all LA. But you really do. You shut down the desire to find an answer to this, and you allow yourself to kind of flow in nature. And I'm telling you, the answer is like downloaded. And I took my phone, I take notes on that stuff. It's an incredible thing. But the reason why I bring up flow state is I don't like to go to the gym. And I go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. I don't enjoy it. Like getting out and going there. Some people love it. I don't. But I love to go in the sauna. I love it. It's one of my favorite things. So my reward, my dopamine hit for my ADHD brain is I'm going to go and get the sauna after I go to work out. So I get a carrot that's dangling there. So whoever's listening to that, if you can find that thing that you really love as your reward for doing something you don't really love, that'll help you anchor that into your habit.
Interesting.
Eating right, exercising, and then also, I don't know how many people talk about this, but your surroundings, the people that you are with. If you have energy vampires in your life, at this point in my life, you have to let them go. You have to have people that are sort of vibrating at your frequency. They're also able to lift you up and you lift them up. And that community that you build around yourself, that's one of the other keys that you have control over and to help you build that community.
I think that is something that in the mental side of our health, we're starting to understand more that you are the sum of who you hang around with. So
absolutely, 100%.
Nice. Len, as I mentioned, we went a lot of different places, and I know that we could keep going on, but I want to make sure before we leave. Now, you have 2 websites. We didn't talk about which one to promote, so I'm going to ask you, do you want to just promote one or both?
Well, I mean, EndoDNA is my business. I'm the CEO of the company. But the reason why I have Len May Coaching is because I've been asked over the years. So I wrote a book, and it's my 3rd book, and this book is called Jack of All Trades, Master of Some. So the reason why I wrote the book is, as I said, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I was given a talk somewhere, and the guy that introduced me, he called me an autodidactic polymath. I had the same expression as you. I was
And you remember that, obviously.
I was like, what'd you call me? And Philly came out. I was like, what? And then
step outside.
Exactly. So then I had to go look it up. And an autodidactic is somebody who's hyper-focused, who's doing one thing. And a polymath is somebody who can become who's an expert in a certain field outside of going to school for that. So the poster child for a polymath is Leonardo da Vinci. He, it took him 10 years to paint the Mona Lisa, but he was an expert in many different things. As a painter, an artist, sculptor, an inventor, he created weapon systems, he created flying machines, like so many different things. But then when I started researching him, he also potentially had ADHD. So I said, you know what, let me expand my research. And I discovered that more than half of the billionaires in the world also were diagnosed with it, and they were polymaths. So people like Richard Branson, a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, a lot of entertainers, and a lot of brilliant people. So I read a book on polymath, and I started is there a correlation between ADHD and polymathy? And I couldn't find, I found research and I found data, but I didn't find a book on it. So I decided to write it. So I wrote this book on ADHD and polymathy, as I said, and people are asking me if I can help them. So I have this coaching site that if, high-level executives or whoever wants to get in touch and they want to go through some coaching support, that's something I offer as well.
Okay. So EndoDNA.com is the one website, and LenMayCoaching.com is the other. And then I'll also make sure we put a link to your book, Jack of All Trades, Master of Some, ADHD and Polymath, Rewiring the Modern Genius. So having said that story, I'm going to ask this, and we're way over. So I've already figured out we're going to split this into two shows. So the question now is, do you ever go back and talk to teachers, classmates, and say, how do you like me now? Because I'm assuming that when you were diagnosed with ADD back then, you were not expected to amount to much, correct?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. Teachers, not so much.
Okay.
I really, people always talk about, I had this teacher in school that was my mentor, and I didn't have any of that. So I never had really good teachers, and maybe that's part of the issue. But friends, I had a lot of friends when I got kicked out when I was homeless. They turn on me, oh, he's the druggie, he's the pothead, guy. But I would say maybe 70, 80% of those people have come back to me and asked me if I can help them or one of their loved ones or a parent or anybody else with a condition that they're going through with the knowledge that I have now. So at some point I was a pothead, but then I became somebody as a go-to expert to help them. So yeah, I think it all came full circle.
It did. And I knew of the homeless part. I wasn't sure if we would talk about it. I didn't think we would bring it up, but you just did. So let's at least just tie a knot there for people, because somebody's going to write me and say, dude said he was homeless and you didn't ask him about that. So at one point you said you got kicked out of school.
I got kicked out of my home.
Got kicked out of home. Okay. Yeah. So you were homeless, and now
you're called the cops. So my parents, they didn't know what to do. They, as we talked about, drugs. So they actually called the cops on me. 2 female officers came in my house when I was living with my parents. And my dad told me before, he's like, don't bring this junk, in the house. So I left it. I had a car. I left it underneath my seat of my car. I had like a little pouch, whatever. And they took it and they threw it out. There's nothing they could do because it was a small amount at the time. Even though it was legal, but they didn't feel like messing with it. So the lady cop, one of them, she goes, if it was my son, I would kick him to the curb. My dad literally kicked me out the door. So I had a suitcase of clothes and I had a car and $500. And that's kind of how I started.
And how many businesses have you done?
Oh, man, lots of business. But I had 3 successful exits,
Okay.
I guess I would say. Lots of different businesses, lots of failures, lots of successes. But I think I'm not really employable. I don't love working for other people. So that's really been a challenge. And I'm curious. So I think ADHD is my superpower. And as much people, I had so much pushback on this. Well, what do you mean? It's detrimental. It's this and that. Hey, for me, it's my superpower. Because one of the things that I think people don't realize with people that have ADD is we have different pattern recognition than other people. We can see 3 things that may seem unrelated and we can relate them. So our brain is always trying to find patterns. And that's why we can multitask more effectively. It's not like I'm doing 3 things at once that are unrelated. It's I'm doing 3 things that have a relationship that I can utilize to get to the end goal, faster, more effectively. So that's my superpower. And I think leaning into that and into your curiosity allows you to, be successful. Well, however you define success.
All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there. Again, Len May, thank you very much for sharing all of this. And just trying to figure out how I'm going to close this off because there is a lot there to talk about. But again, folks, his information will be in the show notes, the websites, and the book, as I mentioned there. Len, obviously somebody who is going to make us look at personalized medicine at some point in time, which will eventually turn into individualized medicine. So, Len, thank you very much for sharing, and we'll get some people over to your site and over to your book. But thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for this episode of the Unhealthy Podcast. I wish you all the best out there. Follow Len's advice. Figure out what works for you. Stop trying to follow everybody else. We are so different when it comes to not just our physical bodies, our mental health, our DNA, so that something that works for one obviously may not work for the other. Figure out what it is. Go get some testing. I believe your cannabis, it was nicknamed the 23andMe version of cannabis, right?
They used to call it 23. Instead of 23andMe, it's 23 and weed. The 23andMe of weed, which I don't particularly like, but that's what people said.
Okay. All right. So, Len May, everybody, before we go, I think the takeaway is that we are not all wired the same. Trying to treat ourselves like we are just like everybody else doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you got value out of this, and I'm pretty sure you did, make sure you share this with someone who's been struggling to figure out their health, their focus, or not just feeling quite right. As always, folks, thanks for listening. We'll catch you in another episode. And until then, live healthy and be happy.